Sagamore is a company, a distillery out of Maryland. They do very similar to what Frere Ranch does in Nevada. So really? they're farm to glass.
The difference is they specialize in rye.
Yeah, although I did hear they're supposed to have their first bourbon.
That doesn't surprise me.
But they predominantly, because they're in Maryland, so let's backtrack. So if you don't know, so when whiskey started in America, it was predominantly rye because the first part of the country to settle was the East Coast.
And the East Coast grows a lot of...
They grow a lot of rye. It's that rye.
What is rye anyway?
It's a grain, right? So like rye bread, right? So it's the same thing. So you would grow a bunch of rye and then mill it and make rye flour to make rye bread.
Yes.
Right? So which is the same thing that they did in Kentucky with the leftover corn. They would grow the corn, grind it down, whatever they didn't use for bread or tortillas. I don't know if they had tortillas back then, but
they did in the South and the Southwest.
Yeah. So whatever they had left over, they would distill and make whiskey out of. And so back in the day, it was the same thing. So they would grow all this rye grain, use it for bread and flour and stuff like that. And then whatever they had left over, they'd make whiskey out of. Now, rye tends to like to grow in that climate on the East Coast with that soil, that humidity, that heat, all that stuff. And when you move further west, rye doesn't grow very well. And it gets infected. If you're growing different types of rye, other ryes will overtake your field, right? So Sagamore kind of went old school. They're growing their own. Now, technically, it's not 100% rye.
Right.
So they're growing corn, they're growing barley, and they're growing their own rye.
On the back of the bottle, they even specify that they blend high rye and low rye whiskeys, which means it's not 100% rye, because 100% rye is real hard to come by.
It's harder to find. Woodinville has 100% rye. There's a couple others that have 100% rye, but what they do is they took the bourbon approach. And I could be wrong. I don't know the guys, but from my opinion.
From your perspective.
Yeah, my perspective. They took the bourbon approach where you have bourbons that are, to be legally bourbon, it has to be a minimum of 51% corn, correct? Now, most bourbons are in the 60s and 70s, sometimes 80s and 90s corn. Rye is the same way. So for it to be a rye whiskey, it has to be a minimum from the government of 51% rye. Well, you can go from 51% to 100%. That's a huge area to play with your rye.
Very different flavor profiles all along that path.
But that doesn't mean you can't use corn. That doesn't mean you can't use malted barley. So what Sagamore did was, like with bourbon, you've got your high rise and your low rise. Your low rise, 10, 12%. Your 20%, rise in your bourbon, your 30% rise in your bourbon. So what they did was they took the same approach, but they kind of flipped it on its head.
Right.
So they took, higher rye mixed with corn and malted barley.
And lower
rye. And then they age them. Well, they grow everything, they mill it, and then they distill it, and then they age it in Maryland. And then they blend them together.
This particular offering is then finished.
Yeah, this is what's called a finished, or you'll see finished, toasted, double oaks.
What have you.
So basically, and we've talked about it before, you take your whiskey out of your original barrels, you blend them together.
And you put them in a new barrel.
And then you put them in a finishing barrel. They don't really go into what the finishing barrels are. They could be brand new charred oak barrels, they could be used barrels.
We could presume from just practicality purposes that it would be an ex-bourbon barrel.
Yeah, or an ex-rye barrel or something, right? Or
one of the barrels that's already had juice in it.
Yeah, the barrels that they used, right? Now, this is a new bottle that we bought a couple months ago.
However, you have a bottle that is much older.
Yeah, that's the same variety. That's an OG bottle, and you can see with the label, it's
brass,
copper.
It has
brass.
Sagamore Spirit rye on it as opposed to Sagamore rye.
Mm-hmm. But I've said before, I think ryes do better in finishing barrels than bourbons do.
Whereas bourbons, generally, not all bourbons, not all women,
Yeah.
not all bourbons, but for the most part, they end up being pretty sweet, and that overrides every other flavor note. Whereas you look at something like this,
super dark.
Look at the color on it.
Yeah.
The proof's high, and the rye still jumps out.
Yeah, it definitely smells like a rye. You definitely get the spearminty. This isn't that high, dude. The new one's 96 proof.
Goes to show that they may leave it in the barrel for quite a while. Or maybe it's just a testament to what a rye whiskey is.
Yeah, the old one's 96 proof too, so it's a technically lower proof. But because of the ryes they use, boy, they stand out. You get the extra oakiness, but you get some spearmintiness in it too.
It goes to show why on like the Midwinter Night's Dram, they lean very heavily onto the rye because the rye stands up quite a bit.
Yeah, the rye is what they use for that, for sure. Yeah, because I just found in my experience that ryes do quite well.
That's like what we talked about in cocktails. You know, bourbon mixed into a cocktail has a tendency to blend in, whereas if you use a rye as your foundational spirit, it adds a little bit more rather than playing second fiddle.
Yeah, even though that's double barrel, when you drink that, you still get the spiciness of the rye, and when I say spiciness,
you're referring to rye spice.
Rye spice. There's still spearmint in there, which I find a lot in ryes. Mm-hmm. But with that double oaking process, you get a lot of those darker oaky notes, flavors.
For my crazy tasting note on a whiskey such as this, specifically rye in a secondary barrel, I get reminded of like cured meat.
Yeah, either that or I like the cured meat note. I would go like a dark stewed fruit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, same idea.
Yeah, where something that's condensed down, like really condensed down in flavor.
I mean, if you really wanted to get technical about it, you could call it a condensed note.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Where everything's dark, everything's rich.
Everything's melded together.
You could even go like a plum.
Oh, sure.
Right? Like something like that. And now these are getting, I mean, we found this in San Antonio. I found that up in Dallas a couple years ago.
But these are not impossible to find.
No. And the nice thing is they're low proof, right?
So they're not going to punch you in the mouth.
They're sub 100 proof. They're very approachable, but they're so dark and rich and complex that if you haven't had it before, it's really a lot of fun to try something, especially if you're, curious about whiskey.
Oh, absolutely.
Like this is something it's so different than bourbon, but it's not so spicy that it's like, oh, if it's hot outside, I can't drink it, Yeah, this is just really, really good. No,
I thought you were going to not react to it.
No, spam call. Got no time for spam calls. Who the fuck does spam calls anymore?
Do you really want me to answer that question?
I mean, getting off topic, but I mean, it's got caller ID.
Hello, my name is.
Oh, how is that even a business anymore? Anyway,
mostly data harvesting. Whatever. It's bad business. But whatever. It is business.
Damn phones. But yeah, so I guess in general, we'll have to do the Peerless Double Oak, the bourbon.
Of course.
Because we just picked up the Double Oak Rye. So maybe for the next video we'll do
a head-to-head.
We'll do a head-to-head.
That'd be fun.
Because that's fantastic. The bourbon, because it's 110 proof, and the rye is 110 proof. So we should do that, but
we will do that.
In my humble opinion, like ryes typically stand up better to finishing barrels. Now the Lasso Motel which we just did a video
is the
about
exception
that.
Because they really lean into the flavor profile of whatever barrel that they're
The
finishing.
finishing barrel, yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. But yeah, this is findable. If I remember right, it's not super expensive, right?
I'd say it's sub
50, $60.
Yeah, sub 70 for sure.
So for a double barrel product,
which takes a lot more effort to make than your average bottle.
yeah. Now you can do like an Old Forester, not an Old Forester, a 1910, because that's
the 1910 is finished.
Yeah, but that's 60, $70 as well.
Actually, I think these days it's hovering around.
No, it's a little lower, isn't it?
55.
Yeah, it's a little
50,
lower.
55.
I'm thinking of the Woodford Double Oak.
Woodford Double
for
Oak
the bourbon
is pretty expensive.
Yeah, it's not. I think that's 45.
Is that 45 these days?
For the 750, I think it's somewhere around there.
That's quite reasonable.
Which isn't bad. Which we don't have one because we actually did a Woodford Double Oak review.
And then you drank it all.
And then I drank it all because I can't.
Helps yourself.
It's fat kid whiskey. You know, it's so sweet. And
which is what happens when you finish
bourbon.
It ends up really sweet. Unless you use different barrels.
Right, where like ryes, because of the spiciness in the rye, and which is cool with these guys, because they do a blend of their high rye whiskeys and their low rye whiskeys, and low being, north of 51%.
Either way, it's not. I imagine why they do that, especially for the double oak, is because otherwise the high rye would be pretty overwhelming.
I don't know. Could you imagine this at 110 proof or 120 proof?
I'd want them to do it. I'd drink it. But
I mean, if we did a barrel pick and you got a double oak to
that'd be easy. However, I know why that's not their shelf option, because that would be a lot. Yeah, that'd be a very complicated bottle to
yeah, that's nerd whiskey. But so I would say if you ever had the Woodford Double Oak or the Old Forester 1910, not a lot of people have the Peerless Double Oak just because it's hard to find.
I think Sagamore is one of the easiest recommendations to make. Pretty much everything I've had from them has been impressive.
Yeah, we've got a few bottles. We got two of these. What's that one behind you? The
one behind me is the Straights, and we have a sherry finish.
Yeah, that's all we got of those guys. Just because we don't see a lot of that in Texas, which is funny.
If you're in Arizona, I know they're drowning in Sagamore Spark.
Are they really?
For reasons entirely unknown to me.
Yeah.
Well, I remember like 4 years ago, there was like the Sagamore Spirits Double Oak. It was sitting on the shelves and they had it marked down to something silly, like $35, $40.
Yeah, well, people tend to get real weird with rye. And I saw that at the store.
That makes sense. Well, because they don't know anything about it.
Yeah, well, I remember I've told you this story. We haven't talked about it in this form yet.
For those of you just tuning in.
Yeah, I'll tell you this story. It's hilarious because we were talking, I forget which, I think we were talking about the Silver Springs. The sweet rye.
The sweet rye, which is an awesome bottle and also quite weird.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I don't think you can find it anymore, but it's fantastic.
Not after you sold all of it.
I know, I sold all of it when they put it on sale. And I was talking, remember, there were a couple of people around me, and we were all having a conversation about this. And
I do remember this story.
And I was like, dude, this fucking rye is amazing. And now, to be fair, at my store, we didn't have a whole big selection of Sagamore. We had like one bottle of just the regular straight rye. So I wasn't selling that. I was talking about this one in particular. And and he had the typical attitude of your normal bourbon drinker. It's like, oh no, ryes are only good when it's cold out in the wintertime, and ryes are too spicy,
and you said
this and that. And I'm like, don't you have air conditioning? I'm like, you can't sit in a 70 degree house and
don't you have a fan?
And drink rye? Like what? I mean, are you drinking it out? It's 110 outside. I get it, 105.
You only drink whiskey outside.
Are you sitting outside sweating your sack off, fighting the flies, and drinking rye? So that's that was the.
Well, it's like the perception we discussed in a previous episode about the beer world. It reminds me of most people's opinion of stouts, or especially imperial stouts, where they're like, it's only good in the winter, and I'm
right.
like, no, just don't drink it out when you're standing standing in the sunshine.
If it's hot outside and you just, at our house, you just spent an hour and a half, 2 hours.
You mean air conditioning?
Cutting an edge in the grass.
Oh, that.
And you're hot and fucking sweaty. And you're not going to just gravitate towards the barrel-aged stout.
Nah, it'll be too heavy.
You want something light and refreshing, right? And so, people that say, oh no, ryes are only for the winter. It's like, well, okay, if you're sitting outside, like that makes sense, but it's 2025 going on 2026. I'm like, you can't tell me you don't have AC in your house.
Or at least, at the bare minimum, like windows that insulate.
I'm like, but yeah, so, just thinking.
There's a lot of falsehoods spread about rye, much like stouts.
Yeah, it's the same kind of idea, or cast strength whiskeys, or.
Yeah, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard when someone says, oh, I only drink cast strength whiskey when it's cold outside. I'm like, you're savage.
I'm like, if you're sitting outside, you're sitting around a campfire, it makes sense.
Sure, but
house is at 70 right now. This is delightful.
Yeah.
And it's something different. I mean, it's a double oak product. And we've already talked about that, how it sits in used barrels for X amount of time. I don't know how long.
Could be any length of time.
It could be
2 minutes, could be a couple of years.
Could be, I'm guessing by the color.
It was probably a couple of years.
It's probably 6 months to 18 months.
18 months? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the Old Forester 1910, they typically sit for 6 to 12 months. The Woodford Double Oaks go from 12 to 18 months. In used barrels. So judging by the color, this is, at least 6 to 12 months it sat in a secondary barrel. And depending on the time of the year, if it's in the wintertime, you're not going to get a lot of influence because it's cold. But if it's in the summertime, when you double barrel it, it's going to rapidly age, right? You're going to get a lot more influence out of these barrels than if you did it in the winter. So this is old. It's still probably pretty close. And like I said, they've done some experimentation with bourbon over the years. They're supposed to have a bourbon coming out.
Which will be
fun.
I'm sure that's going to be good.
Yeah, because everything Sagamore does
has been impressive.
And I've always been a huge fan of them. Like I said, we don't have a ton of their bottles just because they're, for whatever reason in Texas, they're kind of hard to find. Maybe the distribution's not great out here.
Well, you've been in business, the distribution isn't great out here.
Yeah, and you can get lucky. Like I said, we were down in San Antonio and found the new bottle. But this bottle's so cool with the old label. It's like I really
don't want to drain it.
I might pour some of that into here just because I love the old label.
Right.
But
either way, if you can find it, drink it. It's great.
Yeah, and don't be afraid of ryes. It's different, but the reason it's cool is because it's different.
Exactly.
Right?
It's unique.
Yeah, and with most ryes, we've talked about it before, you can find those notes. You can find those spearmint notes and those, baking rye spice notes. And like I used to tell people, like if you've ever had rye bread compared to white bread or compared to wheat bread, there's a difference. And that's just from the damn grain. And it transfers over to the whiskey, which is really cool as somebody that's super curious about different whiskeys and bourbons.
If you're ready to have a more complicated relationship with your whiskey, venture into rye, because it's extremely interesting.
And if you can find the double oak, buy it and you won't regret it.
Woo! Rye whiskey, love it.
Fucking, how do you not like rye whiskey?